How many loans were done this way? And how much money are we talking about?
According to Ricky, there were at least 6 dummy companies which took out almost $2 billion in loans.
Almost $2 billion in loans. The bank must have been running out of cash.
Yes, the bank's cash assets were being dissipated. This means that the bank, over time, was losing assets that would generate interest income for the bank. According to Ricky, these dummy loans would cost the bank as much as $250 million in interest income a year. That's a lot of income.
But 250 million pesos in opportunity cost represents what?
If Banco Filipino earned an extra $250 million in interest income by not giving dummy corporations loans, it would have doubled its interest income to $500 million a year. In other words, it chose to forgo half its revenues.
It explains why the bank was spending more than it earns in interest, instead of the other way around. If I ran my business that way, I would run out of cash in no time at all.
Banco Filipino was running out of cash. Ricky told me that, as of 2002, the bank's liquidity position was only 12%.
Liquidity. In English, please.
It means that if more than 12% of the bank's deposits were withdrawn, the bank would be completely out of cash.
It was in this condition as early as 2002?
Yes.
So how did the bank survive for 8 more years?
Simple. According to Ricky, BSP just opened its wallet to Banco Filipino. It got $1.34 billion in emergency loans in 2002, and a standby emergency credit facility of $3.5 billion in December 2002. He does not know if Banco Filipino availed of the entire facility, but he does know that BSP expanded its support for Banco Filipino by $3 billion since 2004, so much so that Banco Filipino now owes BSP around $4.5 billion in past due loans. The bank also tried to raise $3.2 billion in capital by accepting real estate properties as payment for unsubscribed common shares. Fortunately, this was rejected by the BSP. He also said that the bank could also have survived by taking in new money every day in the form of new deposits, since the depositor base grew by $8.5 billion since 2004.
So Banco Filipino was taking money from BSP and money from depositors like you to fund their losses and continue their dubious loan practices?
It seems like it.
But that's a Ponzi scheme.
Yes, if it looks like a Ponzi scheme, feels like a Ponzi scheme, and sounds like a Ponzi scheme, it probably is a Ponzi scheme. And, according to Ricky, if Banco Filipino was losing $2 billion a year since 2007, and if its capital remained at $1.6 billion since 2004, the bank was basically losing its entire capital base every single year since 2007, or possibly even earlier.
But maybe the stockholders put in more money since then.
We don't know for sure since Banco Filipino hasn't had an audited financial statement since 2002. But that is highly unlikely. If the controlling shareholder is making all these dubious loans, then it would be highly unlikely that he would be putting money in the bank when he was supposedly taking money out of it. Also, it would be highly unlikely for other investors or minority stockholders to put in even more money into the bank without demanding a change in management or a greater say in the board.
Then it begs the question, wouldn't have the minority stockholders in Banco Filipino have complained if the bank was losing so much money?
But the minority stockholders did complain, way back in 2002 and 2003. Anne-Marie Aguirre Caruga, sister of the controlling shareholder Bobby Aguirre, asked the BSP to investigate the bank in April 2003, claiming the bank management and directors had put the bank and its depositors in jeopardy.
Yes, now I remember. But I thought it was a family squabble. You know, some rich people fighting over their inheritance.
It's not a family squabble when the public interest is at stake. Obviously, I got hurt, and a lot of other people like me lost their life savings. I'm pretty sure the bank's rank-and-file employees who lost their jobs probably lost their retirement benefits as well. And what of the public stockholders of Banco Filipino? Their investment was wiped out. and the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation could have saved a substantial portion of the 9.4 billion pesos it has to pay depositors out of its insurance fund.
So what came of it? What happened to the investigation?
Nothing. Basically nothing. Banco Filipino management stayed in place, and minority stockholders were shut out. The bank did not hold any formal board meetings. It did not have any audited financial statements since 2002. The only difference was that Banco Filipino was placed under rehabilitation by the BSP as a condition for receiving emergency funding.
Did the minority investor have any other legal remedies?
None. The minority shareholders pushed this all the way to the Supreme Court. However, last June 19, 2009, the Supreme Court ruled that all bank fraud cases are the exclusive jurisdiction of the BSP. Under this ruling, shareholders have no recourse to the regional trial courts, even if the BSP did not act on their complaints. Regular courts only have jurisdiction if a petition has been filed on the ground that the action taken by the BSP exceeded their jurisdiction.
What does that mean?
It means that the BSP is judge, jury, and executioner for all bank fraud cases. If the BSP doesn't act, shareholders are, as in this case, literally stuck.
Who cares? Banco Filipino is a small bank. Now that the bank is closed, and Banco Filipino directors and management have been criminally charged by BSP, is this even an issue?
It depends. The issue of this ruling could tie up the courts for years. But the ruling has very serious implications for all Philippine banks. Imagine if the Ayalas decide to steal from Bank of the Philippine Islands, one of the country's largest banks. Minority investors, especially foreign investors such as the Development Bank of Singapore, or DBS, will have to go to the BSP, and only the BSP. And if BSP refuses to act, DBS will be stuck, or will be forced to sell their stake for practically nothing.
The Ayalas will steal from their own bank.
No, I'm not saying that. The Ayalas are a very reputable group. What I'm saying is that, if any powerful and criminally minded bank owner was determined to steal from his own bank, he probably could. And he could get away with it for years. Nobody would be able to stop him. The bank will probably collapse first before he is caught. The regulatory and justice system, that is designed to protect ordinary people like you and me, is really very, very weak.
So what does this mean?
It means that investors, especially foreign ones, will hesitate to invest in our banks. Our country's ability to continue to attract investment into the local banking system, a key element of continued economic growth, will be diminished.
That's only a hypothetical situation.
It's not a hypothetical situation. Definitely not. How many banks have closed because of bad loans, or possibly fraudulent management in recent years? Quite a few. Urban Bank, Capital Development Bank, Legacy Group, All Asia Bank, Orient Bank. And just last November 2010, the BSP stated that it was closely monitoring 8 big commercial banks for possible violations of DOS-RE rules. So, it's not a hypothetical situation. It can become a reality very, very quickly.
You're definitely right. It is scary. Still, do you have an idea of why BSP took so long to act?
I don't know. It could be that the regulators were afraid.
Afraid?
They could be afraid that Banco Filipino could sue them for all they've got and win. Do you know that this is the second time Banco Filipino was closed? The first time was in 1985, when Banco Filipino was much bigger, with around 4 million depositors. The central bank, BSP's predecessor, ordered Banco Filipino closed and liquidated. Banco Filipino then sued the central bank and its officers. And in 1991, the Supreme Court declared the closure arbitrary and with grave abuse of discretion. Banco Filipino still has an outstanding 18.8 billion peso damage suit against the central bank, the estate of the late CB Governor Jobo Fernandez, in whose watch Banco Filipino was closed in 1985, and 3 other CB officials, who served as conservator and receiver during the period Banco Filipino was closed. The bank has managed to project itself as a victim of injustice, ready to include in the suit any official who plays hardball with it.
Wow.
Now you can understand why BSP is extremely cautious.
But still, 8 years. And all the depositors and taxpayer money lost.
If you were a regulator and had a choice between losing your money or the public's money, which would you most likely choose?
So what happens now?
I don't know. Both the BSP and Banco Filipino have swapped charges against each other. We'll have to see which one sticks. But this case only goes to show how difficult it can be to protect depositors, investors, and the taxpayer. Justice takes a very long time in this country. And by the time justice is meted out, there may be nothing of value left to recover. I can't recall a single high-level bank executive or owner that has gone to jail for bank fraud in this country. Many of these guys still roam around scot-free. I don't think they were ever charged in court by the regulators. It's hard to trust a financial system that's run this way. And there may be other banks like Banco Filipino in the future.
We are screwed.
Yes, we are. In the Philippines, the best way to rob a bank might be to own one.